Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming on to this call at short notice. The objective, of course, was for us to have a roundtable discussion around the three labor codes that have been passed. And we have our friends from the legal fraternity who would bring in their perspective into this meeting. And then we will go on to the industry to get the industry perspective where it hurts and where it helps. Now there are quite a few areas where it helps the industry, and there are a few pain points too. I'm not going to dwell on that, but I would rather let the table decide upon it. And the end result of this, the objective, of course, is that we will distill all the thoughts and discussions here, and then take it down to the government of Karnataka as far as the rules framing is going. And also partner with the other trade bodies and organizations to get on to the public policy of the government. So with that, I would like to call upon Mr. President to provide the opening address, and then we will quickly go to Mr. BC Prabhakar, who has done immense amount of work in this space, and hear him. We also have from the industry leaders, and I will call them, and I will also call out the legal experts over here as soon as we finish with the President's welcome note, as well as Mr. BC Prabhakar. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Augustus. A very good evening to all of you. Hearty welcome to this program. In fact, thankful to the HR committee for organizing this program in a very timely manner. This labor reforms has come at the very right time to support Make in India and also to make India the kind of economic superpower by 2025, one of the top three in the world. Therefore, it's been a very timely move. In fact, one of the biggest challenges that has been facing the nation has been these labor reforms, which had a lot of deliberations in the past, and now a lot of clarity has emerged. In fact, the wages code had come was passed last year, but the other three codes, in fact, 29 labor codes now merged into basically four, and the Wages Act code was passed last year, and now the three codes are being passed. One on the safety and health, then social security and industrial relations. So all the labor codes have been merged into this. So this is a great move. And definitely it's a win-win for both sides, I would say. Because from the labor point of view, a lot of concessions have been extended, like, in terms of safety. For example, people are getting an accident outside. Now all are covered. Earlier in the company, they are covered. Now even on the way to the company, I think that's a great move. And similarly, even the kind of VSI and PF, they're all merged and everybody is covered. And larger cover for other unorganized sector, which means those sectors have been very fairly and adequately addressed. Similarly, from the other side of the coin, the 14 days strike notice. Now today it's mandatory across the board. Earlier it was a must for all the public utility services like railways. Today it's a mandatory clause across the board, and companies can terminate people up to 300, which means that there's a lot of flexibility given to companies. And even the short-term, fixed-term employment, now again it's liberalized now. So these are all providing flexibility to ease of manufacturing. I'm sure this is a great move by the government. And our Labour Minister, Sri Santosh Gangwar, has come out with a detailed announcement. So today we have all gathered here to deliberate these issues with legal experts, industrial relations experts, and industry experts. And of course, this is chaired by our good friend, philosopher and guide, Sri Prabhakar. I think he is a veteran in this area and he is well respected in the nation. So I'm very happy that he is also our mentor to Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, to the HR and Women Empowerment Committee. Therefore, I'm very happy that these deliberations have come on the right time. I'm sure there'll be a lot of takeaways to the participants. And hope that definitely there'll be a lot of value out of this meeting. I also welcome the other panelists, Sri Pramod and Mrs. Veena, Mr. Srinivasan, then Mr. Reddy and Mrs. Debjani. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time. I'll hand it over to Augustus to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for setting the tone so much, Mr. President. So we will...
I also recognize the presence of Mr. Ahmed Ali. He is a very senior person and he is advising us on several HR aspects to our chambers. A very well-respected man. Welcome, Mr. Ahmed Ali. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Thank you. Welcome, sir. We also have various chairmen and co-chair of the expert committees here. Welcome. And very quickly, let's move on. And after Mr. BC Prabhakar, I would fail in my duty if I didn't acknowledge the presence of another very important leader from our industry, Mr. Pramod Mahatme, who's the Vice President, Employee Relations and Industrial Relations at Wipro Enterprise Limited. We have Veena Gopalakrishnan from AZB Partners, and Veena has been of immense support to the Bangalore Chamber in both the women's empowerment and now also the HR committee. Happy to have you, Veena. We also have Poornima Hatti. Poornima has been so passionate about these labor codes, and I have been reading what she has been sending. So thank you so much, Poornima, and we look forward to hearing you. And of course, we also have Abe Abraham. Poornima Hatti is from Samvad Partners. Abe Abraham is a partner with Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. Abe has also sent me some inputs, and we would love to hear your perspective on this, Abe. And last but not least, we have Debjani Aich. She's the employment law practice leader for Kochhar and Company. And once again, thank you for joining, Debjani, and everybody else for your and for bringing your thoughts and knowledge onto the table. With this, let me open it up and welcome Mr. BC Prabhakar. And he has been working on these codes at least for the last decade, I could say, because I remember many years ago going and asking him, why don't we start with giving a white paper which we had developed on employment law codes, just like Europe had those days. I remember those formative discussions, and looking back, I think we've had a very long journey. Like any journey, it has been hard. It has had its speed bumps, but I think end of the day, we are able to see it bringing a lot of progress to the industry and to our businesses as a whole. So thank you so much, Mr. BC Prabhakar, for all your help and support and taking this into various forums. Now we would like to hear you and then guide us on to the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Augustus, Mr. Parasuraman, Prithvi, Augustus. I thank all of you for giving me this opportunity. I am happy to share my thoughts. In fact, this is my 50th year of profession, and for the last 40 years, that is, I see, first Labour Commission, second Labour Commission, I have been, I see, making representations, and same thing for the last 2 decades also. Whenever there is a change in the minister, labor secretary, both central and state level, I've been sending letters urging for, important amendments. At last, like what we say in Kannada, Gajagarba. So something has come out, but we need a lot more. But this is a welcome move from the industry point of view. In fact, now going to the IR code, I would like to confine myself to IR code. That itself will take me about up to 15 minutes. Please pardon me. I am not able to cut it down because I want to share with you important legal changes. So I'll try to minimize and bring to your notice the important legal changes. Then one can assess whether it is good or something more is needed immediately.
Record பண்ணுங்க.
Yes. And this IR code, it amalgamates and also simplifying and also rationalizing three acts, that is Trade Union Act, Standing Orders Act, and Industrial Disputes Act. Now, our President has already given the context. It provides for a broader framework to protect the rights of workers and also minimize the friction between management and workers. And also, see, certain rights were cut off in the matter of management and that has been to some extent has been restored. Now, with this, I would like to go into the definitions. In fact, to understand a legislation, if one goes through the definitions and understand, digest it, then 50% of the act you have already understood. So here I am going to place before you only those definitions where significant change has taken place. Now, first, what is industry? In fact, there was a lot of talk about it. Everything was industry except domestic service. But now it has been clear that charitable or institutions substantially engaged in charitable, social, or philanthropic services are not industry. This is a great relief for such institutions, and it also makes it clear domestic service is not industry. Only Justice Kushner has exempted, but legislation also exempts. Now, all the codes have uniform name for workman. Earlier it was employee, workman, and so many things. Now it's only worker. So all direct contributors are workers and supervisors getting more than 18,000 rupees are not workers. And there is one more definition called employee. Employee includes workers plus supervisors and managers. But this employee definition is more relevant for wage code, not for IR code. But please understand, employee includes manager and supervisor, but worker does not include manager and supervisor. Now, wages. In fact, wages definition has created a lot of confusion because under various enactments, various definitions were there. But now there is one uniform definition for all the codes. But this is more confusing. Even it took some time for me to understand it. So after digesting it, the definition of wages to understand easily, basic wage plus half of 50% of all the allowances. It goes to basic wage, and that is basic wage for all purposes. So that is the simple analysis. And fixed term employment has been incorporated. In the Standing Orders Act, it was incorporated, but it was confined to few industries, but subsequently they expanded. But now, IR code defines fixed term employment. As a result, every establishment can have fixed term employees, and it may become a little costly. Fixed term workman, even if he works for a fixed term worker, even if he works for 1 year, he is eligible for gratuity, and he has to be paid on par with permanent workers, wages and certain benefits. And one good thing is, you see, it is applied to all sectors, and you have to give a appointment order stating that is a fixed term employment, and period you must mention, benefit you must mention. And the definition of retrenchment excludes fixed term employment. Therefore, at the end of the term, if he is discharged, no notice salary, no compensation. So that is a good thing. The definition has been included, and also the retrenchment exception clause, one clause has been added to the old definition. Now let us come to layoff, retrenchment, and closure. In fact, factories, mines, and plantations having more than 100, if they want to lay off, retrenchment, and close, they have to take permission. Now, this threshold limit has been increased to 300. Actually, we wanted this to be eliminated from the code, but they made to 300. One good thing is government has power to increase this one by way of notification, not go back to legislation. And as far as the retrenchment is concerned, one significant change. See, if a worker is retrenched, whenever you fill up the vacancy, you have got to call him back. And there is no time limit mentioned. Even of 10 years, that place has to be reserved for him, and you have to innovate him. If it doesn't come, then you can take a person. But now, a very good thing is 1 year has been inserted. After 1 year, you can fill up the vacancy. That is, old 25H has been amended to include 1 year. And in the case of retrenchment, compensation continues to be 15 days, but there is one reskilling fund. You have got to pay to the reskilling fund per employee 15 days salary, and this will go to the government kitty, and they will use it for reskilling fund. I don't know whether this will be like a cess fund, where in fact 9,000 crores are there in Karnataka itself, not utilized. Whether this also will see the same pattern or not, I do not know. Now, as far as strike is concerned, one definition has been added, that is, strike definition is amended to include concerted casual leave by workers. So, this is a good thing. And either for strike or lockout, 14 days notice is a must. President also mentioned in the beginning itself, and there is a welcome move. This applies to all establishments, not only for public sector. Now, this conciliation proceedings. Earlier, the moment notice was issued, conciliation deemed to have started, but now, when the first meeting is fixed, on that day, the conciliation deemed to have started. And if conciliation fails, there is a reference by the government of the dispute, but now that is not there. If conciliation failure, the parties can go directly to the industrial tribunal, and they can file a petition. Just like civil court, it becomes a plaint and written statement, and there is no hassle of government making reference or not making reference. In fact, this is a good move because that was taking a lot of time. And I see, only in the case of national tribunal, government has reserved the power to refer the dispute to the national tribunal. Now there is no labor court. Labor court will be abolished. Court of inquiry and board of conciliation, labor court, all these three will be abolished, and only industrial tribunal will be there. So the matter should go to industrial tribunal. And industrial tribunal, what is the composition? Now it is only single judge. So it is two persons will be there. One is judicial member and the administrative member. And the quality of administrative member is very significant to note, that he must be expert in labor economics, management, and various other things are there. That is helpful in selecting an administrative member who has industry perspective. This is a welcome move. And of course, judicial member will come from the judiciary. In fact, for certain dispute like individual termination, single member can take up, and for wage scale disputes and others, two-member tribunal must deal with the situation. Now, this grievance redressal committee, at present there is no cap in that. Now they have said it must be the GRC, at, where 20 or more workers are working in the establishment, whatever the limit, 10 is the maximum number of committee members. This is also a welcome move. Now, this is about disputes aspect. Now, coming to standing orders. At present, Standing Orders Act is applicable mainly to factories, and is applicable to establishments or not. There was a doubt. Therefore, we moved the state government, and they exempted IT companies from the Standing Orders Act. But that was being extended. But under the new code, the Standing Orders Act is applicable to all establishments provided they have got 300 and more workers. So this limit of 50 in Karnataka and 100 in other states has been raised to 300. And state governments can increase the number, but they can't reduce the number. And now IT companies also are in the net. Now, whether we should ask for exemption or not is the question that has to be debated. According to me, you see, the new provision has been added in 2019 when IR code was introduced in the parliament. So it provided for certification, but we made a strong representation stating that in Maharashtra, model standing orders is deemed certified standing orders. And if somebody wants, hello, if somebody wants, I think also you have to mute. If somebody wants, I think anything to be included, that only should be certified. And fortunately, in the IR code, it is that such a provision is there. IR code clearly says there is a model standing order which is going to be formulated by the central government. If the employer adopts the model standing order, deemed to be certified standing order, and if you want any change relevant to the industry, then only you can go for certification of that particular this one. So therefore, our focus, in fact, BCIC should take up this matter. Our focus should be that formulation of the proper model standing order. And in this area also, I am not very anxious. I am not worried in the sense, you see, model standing orders to be framed by the central government is confined only to few items like recruitment, classification, and grievance procedure, discipline procedure, retirement age. It is all very minimal. But all our IT companies have got a service role which is much more than generous. So therefore, even if model standing orders are confining to the schedule is formulated, it will not affect any industries. Deemed certification is very good. Now coming to trade union, same number of 7. I don't know what is the magic for the 7. Any 7 persons can formulate a union. When I say persons, even a manager can join a trade union. So the definition of worker for the purpose of trade union,
One day you were there, right?
it includes you see all persons employed. Hello, pardon? Hello, somebody is speaking.
Request all of you to kindly mute your mic.
Balsubramanian has to mute his mic. Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. In fact, the 7 persons of the industry employed can form a union. But however, I say the provisions of negotiation council has been introduced. So 51% if some union commands membership, they are called negotiating union. And the balance out of 50%, if another trade union is there and if they have support of 20%, then they will be given 1 seat and they are called as a negotiating council. So negotiating union, negotiating council, these 2 things are there. And when registration of the union is cancelled, they can appeal to the industrial tribunal. And I think this code empowers central government and state government to recognize a trade union or a federation of trade unions as the central trade union or state trade union. This is a new, provision. It was not there earlier. But coming to offences and penalties have really scared. Now, for different types of violations, although it has been rationalized, but the penalty amount has been raised from 2,000 to 20 lakhs. At present, it was 50 rupees to 5,000, which goes from 2,000 to 20 lakhs. And imprisonment varies from 1 month to 6 months. So there is a substantial increase in penalties. Recently, Lok Sabha passed on the same day Companies Amendment Bill, wherein they reduced the penalties for the company law, but for labor law, they increased it. It's a little scary. But there is a compounding of offences is there. A gazetted officer who is designated for this purpose, so he can compound the offences for a 50% of the maximum fine provided for such offence, punishable with overall fine, and for a sum of 75% if such offence is punishable under imprisonment. You can pay the fine of 50% or 75% of the maximum amount and escape the escape the jail term, imprisonment. And one good thing is exemption from the provisions of the IR code. In fact, this I have to read twice. This provision clearly says central or state government may exempt a new establishment or a class of new establishment from all or any provision of the code in public interest. So that means they can exempt new industry starting in Karnataka will not be applicable by any of the labor by IR code. That means they are free to hire and fire. This is in Gujarat. In 2004 itself, Gujarat amended their IT Act and said that new industries will not be covered by Chapter 5B, that is law of closure and retrenchment. Now, enabling provision is there, so this Karnataka government can make use of it. We should specifically bring this from BCIC to the notice of the state government, and now they have the land reforms exemption is given, or a land reform is amended that companies can purchase agricultural land directly, and if they also say that you will be exempted from Chapter 5B, then more industries may come to Karnataka. I request Parasuraman to take up this issue. But for the existing industries, such a blanket exemption cannot be given, and it can be given conditionally and unconditionally if in the establishment there exist adequate provisions to fulfill the objects of the code. But no company will have such a code, such a provision. Therefore, it is impossible to do it. So these are the main provisions which I wanted to bring to the notice of all the members of the BCIC, and according to me, it provides certain relief to us, and some more has to be done. We have to make a provision. So thank you all for the patient hearing, and also I thank BCIC once again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Please do stay on, sir.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. While we go around the table, I would like to request Mr. Pramod Mahatme to give his perspective from the industry standpoint, and then we'll do a round table with the rest of the legal experts out here. Thank you.
Yeah, see, I have been in the industry for last 39 years now, and have been handling only the labor relations. One of the key, this thing which I've observed, which is often a myth, that we all believe that Indian laws are favorable to workers. In fact, they are not at all favorable to workers. So if Indian labor laws were favorable to workers, our minimum wages would not have been so low. Our social security would not have been what it is. Our compensation which is paid when somebody is retrenched is not so less. Our safety standards are not something which are really out of the world. Our laws, if at all, they are very union friendly. They are not labor friendly. I think we have to move from labor friendly, your union friendly, to a labor friendly, to a worker friendly legislation. Now, look at this Trade Unions Act. After all, Trade Unions Act provides for registration, raising funds, fulfilling certain accounting requirements, and promoting the process of collective bargaining. I don't think there is any way of going back to the times of BPO RDA. In a democratic country like ours, I think we have to leave it, and there is no requirement of any change. Then what is it that when we say our laws are archival, and what is it? Now, if you see, there is a tremendous protection which is provided, and industry was protected. It was perfectly fine as long as industry was protected from competition and workmen were protected from exploitation. So this entire situation was very well balanced, and only people who were not protected in those days were the consumers. So if your automobile industry would go on strike, then the consumer who had to wait for 10 years to get his car would have had to wait for 15 years. Because both the parties would have settled. But the situation changed after 1992 when the industry was exposed to the global competition and the protection continued. And this change has brought in lot of disparities, and it has become extremely difficult for industries to manage in this situation where industry does not have a protection, but our labor laws provide inadequate, more than sufficient protection. So I was just looking at what is it that we say is so archival? What is it which is really so? So I would say there are only 4 changes. There are only 4 items in the entire labor law that has really been causing problems for industry. The rest of the things, whether it is Payment of Wages Act or a Minimum Wages Act, or the getting 100 licenses or 5 licenses, and all these are procedural and we can always manage. Maybe a little difficult in terms of coming into the compliances. But fundamentally, if you see, there are 4 items which are really very, very deadly. No change without agreement, Section 9A. Read with item 9, 10, and 11 of the 4th schedule. No layoff, retrenchment, or closure without permission. That is Chapter 5B, introduced in 1976 under emergency. It was 100 in those days. Later on in 1982, it became 300. And perhaps that is the reason why we have gone back from 300 to 100. So from 1982, we have come back to 1976. Now we have to go a little beyond 1976 and come back to the original. No termination after 240 days of work. If somebody puts in 240 days of work, then he is safe for next 60 years and he doesn't have to work at all. The entire concept of contract labor and whatever we are doing is all because of this excessive protection that has been provided. And the 4th is no strike, right to strike without notice. So if at all I have to ask for something, I would say, don't worry about all other laws. We are willing to look at it, but please change these 4 items. But of course, when they give this, the dil will be manging more. So large employment generated in the service industry, to which Chapter 5B was not applicable, is a clear indication of how, in the absence of overprotection, you are able to get the maximum employment, the largest employment which is available in the country. The way it has grown is in the service industry, the IT industry. And now, therefore, I would say perhaps the government has realized the need to shift the focus to employment generation rather than employment protection, social security rather than job security, and building skills to encash the opportunities. And we have to, and decided to move from a graduate from highly protected poverty to a little less protected prosperity. And unless, so if you look at these 4 items, as I said, in these amendments which have come, I can clearly see for employment generation, they have tried to do away with 5B, although my deal would be asking more, and from 100 to 300 should also go beyond 300. The contract labor amendment, whatever little amendment they have done, they have provided you much more elbow room. And the fixed term employment. Social security, there is an enhanced coverage, creating a national board, and also they are taking care of the migrant labor. See, one of the things which has happened during this COVID pandemic is that migrants from across the world have moved to their hometown. And for the first time, we have realized that a lot of work can be done from the place where you are rather than going to the place of work. And with this, I think one of the major change I see in the years to come is that all this time the labor was migrating to opportunities, and now the opportunities will start migrating to the places where it is labor intensive. So this is a welcome beginning, but many more reforms I'm sure will come. I think that is what I am looking at. But I'm very happy with whatever has been done so far. This is definitely the first move in this direction. Because otherwise, we were always, as I said, since 1975, I was seeing, well, communist China was becoming more and more market oriented. Democratic India was becoming highly socialist. So I think this is a slight reversal which has happened, and I think in the years to come we will see a lot of changes coming through. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. That was very insightful.
Augustus, only one
Yes, sir.
point I
Yeah.
forgot to mention,
Yeah.
that under the OSH code, there is one significant definition of contract labor. You see, permanent contract labor, contractors, permanent employee is not a contract labor.
Yeah.
So there is significant change is going to help, especially IT companies. If one IT company deports its employees to another IT company, there are no more contract labor and no more principal employer. It will be business to business contract. So this is a welcome change. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very good point, sir. So let's peel the onion further. Veena, can you share your perspectives, please?
Hi everyone. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me be part of this roundtable. It is indeed an honor. I'm going to keep this very short because I understand there are several other people who, with a wealth of experience, who also should be sharing their perspectives here. Very quickly, the codes have been brought into play with an objective of consolidating the several laws and amalgamating them. While there have been some significant changes, some beneficial changes, I'm a little disappointed. I think these are a code of missed opportunities. There could have been much more, but let's not keep the focus on that. And from an industry body perspective, I think there are a couple of things that we need to focus on. One would be to understand the codes itself, what it means to each organization, what it means to each category of organization. I think being in Bangalore, there is a lot of focus on IT, but I think we need to broad base that and look at other industries as well. So when we are reaching out to various governments, reaching out to the Karnataka government, I think our objective should be to make pan-industry recommendations. The second aspect is in terms that I believe is really critical, and this is a great opportunity, and it is I mean, we should be striking when the iron is hot, is with respect to workforce structuring. There is a new definition of contract workers, like BCP sir mentioned. There is the whole concept of gig and on-demand workers that has been codified for the first time. This is gray in several countries. We have a definition. We don't have anything very clear in the code itself. The code in social security aims to detail it to some extent. It says the government will set up a fund, but we, at some point in time, the gig economy is only going to grow further, and some point in time we'll need more clarity on what traditional employer-employee relationship means, what category of work will be considered gig, because it shouldn't go back into so what happened with contract workers? there became a concept of deemed employment, and there was a lot of litigation where contract workers went and said, no, we are actually employees of the principal employer, and we should be treated like employees and not contract workers. There should be some stopper to prevent gig workers, platform workers, to be asking for the same benefits. So that kind of clarity is what we should try and build into legislation at this stage, because this is when law on that concept is evolving. So workforce structuring is something that I think we should keep the focus on and see if we can make structured recommendations to the government on what would apply to whom, what are the tests, etc. The third thing that I think is largely ambiguous, and it's not really solved the issue of multiplicity of legislations, is we have 4 codes, great, but then you have your state-specific Shops and Establishments Act as well. You have compliances under the state, the national and state holiday legislations as well. So how are we going to try and reduce the compliance burden? So I think a larger, a more holistic view on what the state government can give us. And again, under each of these codes, it's quite clearly distributed as to what powers the central government has and what powers the state government has. So we'll need to weed out what is it that the central government, what is it that the state government can do, and approach them with relevant recommendations to make any of this, to make this whole objective meaningful. So yeah, and again, the last thing is, yes, codes are great. It's new. It's 150 odd page legislations per code, but the proof of the pudding, in my opinion, is always in the eating. So we'll have to see how the rules come out, how the forms are, how the enforcement is. It's interesting to see that they have an inspector cum facilitator approach, where the authorities are going to be working with the organizations and not working against the organization. So it's a more collaborative approach, and I think it's a great time for industry bodies like us to reach out to these inspectors, whoever is going to be appointed, to see how we can collaborate and make this exercise a lot more meaningful. So this is a very, very brief overview that I've provided. I've not gone into the differences that each code bring with it. Again, in my opinion, I think the gig workers is introduction is a great opportunity for all of us to tap on. It's a huge industry waiting to bloom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veena. I've made copious notes of all that you have said, and yes, we will circulate a draft position in a short while. Poornima, are you there? Poornima Hatti? Sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, just one second before Poornima takes over. Is maybe when we are drafting our recommendations, etc., it would probably, instead of making a code-wise segregation for recommendations, maybe we could do it on a topic basis, because all the codes are interconnected. If you look at the definition of wages, it's one across the 4 legislations. Thankfully, that's again a great, that's one good benefit that has come out of it. So maybe we could look at making it more topical rather than code-wise. Sorry, that's about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Veena. And also for Poornima, as you are coming, and the other 2 after you, Abe and Debjani, let's also focus on the cross-sectoral impact, that Veena had highlighted. It's just not the services industry that, like a lot of us are here in Bangalore used to, but I think we have to look at the cross-sectoral impact too. So any light you can throw upon that will be very useful. Thank you, Poornima.
Thank you, Augustus. I know we're running short on time, so I'll keep it short. I like the idea, Veena, that you had about working with the inspectors and the facilitators. And Augustus, perhaps we could have another round table like this, with them, just to understand how they are interpreting the law, and to understand. So that will take it beyond just one industry. It will truly have a cross-sectoral experience, because I think one of the aims and objective was to prevent rent seeking and corruption of these labor inspectors, which was the objective of the code. So we could see how Karnataka can help grow that. Of course, as was referred earlier by Mr. Prabhakar, Gujarat had made changes, and we've seen Rajasthan also make changes. And the idea is to empower and make sure that there is growth. One other area that the chamber may be interested is that the application of the codes, earlier it was applicable only to 10 employees or 10 workers. This has now been doubled to 20. Statistics show that if there were only 10 employees, there was reluctance of small firms to grow beyond 10 because they had to have the high burden of compliance. So that has now been shifted to 20, and if you're using without power, from 20 to 40. So if there are smaller members within the community at BCIC, what is the impact of these changes on them is something that we could consider and have a conversation with them. I think the gig economy, fixed term employment, as well as the role of aggregators are completely new ideas that have come in. The role of aggregators has a specific schedule. Schedule 7, if you look at it, has a certain number of names which are not very large. So question is, do you want to add to it? Right now, of course, top of the list is the ride sharing services. There's food and grocery delivery services, content and media services, and e-marketplaces. So if there's anything else that we want to broaden this role of aggregators, because there has to be a certain contribution that has to be made to cover these workers. So they're bringing these people within the social security net. But what is the definition of these gig workers? What is the definition of platform workers is still not very clear, because if you read the definition, they're sort of circular. I think there is some scope for Karnataka further refining them, and I think we need inputs from the industry within BCIC to understand whether there are players who want to describe this further, in a more granular way, because certain contributions that will have to be made will affect all members on this front. I think the other point that I wanted to say was that the appeals, as well as reviews that were earlier, they are now more limited. So in terms of what employers and employees, both sides of the coin, are affected, and how you put forth your ideas and how you actually discuss this in a court is now very, very limited. The 2020 bill removes provisions for review, which actually the 2019 bill had. This could be for application of Provident Fund or ESI issues and things like that. So it gives you just one shot at sort of making your point, which is good and bad. In some sense, it sort of clears all the issues you're done with. There's no long pending litigation, but at the same point, you have to be much more careful so that nothing is missed out. I just also wanted to make a comparative law point. There is much discussion that is happening in the US, for instance, on gig workers, and there's a lot of rulings that are coming out of the Californian courts, particularly in terms of what social security or what can be done, particularly growing out of the cab sharing and employer-employee benefits. So since the definition is not very clear, perhaps we could use this opportunity to have a conversation to further define that. And if you want to I'm happy to receive suggestions, collate it, and send it back to this group and work with anybody else to examine that further. But that's something that we can examine more closely before we give it back to the state government. Obviously, as everybody knows, Labour is on the concurrent list, and therefore it gives us the opportunity to refine it as much as possible compared to what the central government has already said. I'm going to stop there, but happy to take questions later on. I know there are other speakers, and we're already at 5:20. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Poornima. Yeah, I think we will collate it, and you've already contributed quite a bit, so I think we expand upon that and then circulate it back here. We have Abe Abraham, also partner from Cyril, Amarchand, Mangaldas. Abe.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I'll be quick on this. Picking up from what Veena and Poornima spoke about, the role of the authorities are going to be very important under these codes. It is a good idea that we work with them along with BCIC to just maybe work to understand how they intend to implement it. One big change that has happened with these codes is that you had states where previously they had banned co-sector activity for contract labor. Now under the code itself, they have added that as a provision. Now it's left to the licensing authorities to understand if it is a regular work that gets done. So there's a lot of back and forth that will happen because of the way it's been drafted. penalties have gone up. Thankfully, unlike your Factories Act, for example, where everything you do or not do attracts imprisonment, here at least they have recognized that it's not the imprisonment point, but the penalties do go up. So again, there is a lot of work that needs to be done in light of these changes. There are also some good news also. The Factories Act, again, to talk about different sectors, it's way better now under this code, the OSH code. The Factories Act did not had a issue with employing women at night. This has opened up the sector for women employees. Yes, you need their consent, but there are safety measures to be put in, but there is no prohibition. The other good news is that there's more clarity on who should be an occupier. Independent directors have been excluded. So that's a very positive change that they have brought in to this code. There are issues with this, to be very clear. The contractor regime, the way the licensing norm is, that is not so clear. Is it only meant for manpower? Is it for execution? Again, there we need to work to understand how the government is looking at providing licenses and who's supposed to be covered. But do remember, under the OSH, I'm talking about OSH, it's a two-step process. It's not a single license that now has to be taken. If you're a factory, and the difference is that earlier it used to be 10 or 20, now it's 20 or 40. But still, if you are a factory with 10, you do have to take a registration. And along with that, once you cross to 20 or 40, depending on that with or without the aid of power, you have a licensing norm. So as a factory, two-step process, commercial establishments, unless your local shops get notified by the state government, again, perhaps you might have to end up taking 2 licenses. So again, for all these reasons, good things are there. There are certain tough regimes that we. One thing I just want to highlight to the group also is that you might now see more trade unionism from the employee side, not just workers, employee side. So they have the way they drafted the worker definition for Chapter 3, they just opened it up for all employees, which is not what I was expecting. So it's a different ballgame altogether. We need to see how that impacts the industry. Otherwise, the IDA, it's kind of copy-paste. There's not many changes. That workman definition is the same. 18,000 is one change, but they did not cater to, say, a software engineer or person who has a different skill set. It's just the way they had, drafted it, the workman definition you would have seen. So there could have been more improvements done, but this is what we have got, and the establishments now need to start thinking about how to implement it at their end. So thank you. That's about it.
Thank you, Abe. Within that short period. So in the interest of time, I'm going to also request we'll go by 5 or 10 minutes over limit. It's a very interesting discussion, so I don't think we should lose out on the richness of the subject and all that people have to share. I want to also go to some of our chairpersons here who head businesses and organizations to get their perspective after we hear Debjani. So Debjani, over to you. Thank you. Please stay on.
Hi. So thank you, first of all, for having me here. It's wonderful to be part of the group. Poornima, Veena, and Abe have covered a lot of the legal stuff. Things that I'm happy about, we have 4 codes. That's great. That's really helpful. It makes a lot of our lives easier. Things that I'm concerned about, apart from the issues that everybody's mentioned, things that I would like the BCIC to go back on. One is for women. Yes, we can work between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. What are we doing about it? Do we need to still adhere to the shops requirements? Do we still need to adhere to the Factories Act requirements? What are we doing about it? So that clarity needs to come in very quickly so we can actually make use of this. The second aspect that made me happy amongst the other things, I mean, first of all, I don't understand why there were so many gaps. There are still gaps that could have been sorted out. There's, you had a chance to create definitions. You had a chance to bring so much more clarity in, especially on the definition of a worker. It's quite sad that at 2020, we're still sitting with the IDA definition, more or less for all intents and purposes. That's just very bizarre. I don't know if that can be sorted out, but it would be great if it could be. Digitization. Digitization for me, from a compliance perspective, with the inspector facilitator role coming in, is critical. And I think Karnataka needs to up its game tremendously. I know a lot of it is online, but there are still snags, there are technical issues. That has to somehow be streamlined now that we've got these codes in place from a compliance perspective. Those are a couple of key things that I had. I am concerned about the Aadhaar card linkage. To put it into a code is somewhat odd given the matter is, there are concerns about privacy here. I would like to know or what the Karnataka, what BCIC is thinking about this Aadhaar card linkage, especially when we're talking about gig workers and platform workers in the unorganized sector. Aadhaar card linkage for somebody who earns base minimum, how does that happen? How are you going to get security coverage, social security coverage without an Aadhaar card? Because you can't be registered unless you don't have an Aadhaar card. Now, how many, really, is this how we're expecting it to happen? We're talking about so many millions of people. It is illogical in my opinion. And I think it's diluting the entire intent of creating a social security system for the unorganized sector just by putting in this procedural requirement. It's a concern that I think we could maybe spend a little bit more time, talking about a little bit. And again, while Veena and Poornima have talked about, the gig workers and the home-based workers, we're all working from home. Where are we right now? That's another thing. I think we need clarity on things. I truly believe that the courts have kind of like just rushed and put everything together. They've literally cut pasted and made some structural changes. A little bit more depth and intensity was required in a reform process like this, especially where the way the economy is evolving and the way the landscape is changing. We need a little bit more structure here. I'm going to stop just in the interest of time so you can pass it on, but I would be really happy to partner with anything along the paper presentations that we need to make to the industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debjani. Of course, we will come back to you on the paper presentation once we collect all this information. And I would like to open this out. One of the thoughts that was coming to mind is, why did we also do this? This was, to do ease of doing business, to bring ease of doing business, right? So what is happening now? Are we making it more difficult for ourselves or for the investors? That is one question that was top of my mind. The other one is, when we had approached this as a unified labor code, like I said, 10 years ago, the intent, of course, was to bring in a labor ecosystem that is very inclusive. Okay, now I don't know, in part that has been achieved by the amalgamation, but overall down on the ground, I don't know. So I'm opening the stage or this channel out for everybody else to contribute. We have industry leaders here too, so let's hear their perspective. Any questions to be thrown at the panelists?
One clarification I wanted to bring about. When we are talking of contract labor, we are making so many peripheral changes like fixed term worker, the contract labor. Actually, the root cause of all this is Chapter 5B. If I am allowed to have people and I have the flexibility of recruiting and compensating him for retrenchment, I don't have to pay the contractor 10% extra charges and 18% tax over it. So if that happens, now what is happening is we are creating that, and because of that all these unfair practices have started, and we are trying to regulate those practices. I think if there is a single point pushing that has to be done is to get rid of Chapter 5B, then you neither need a contract labor nor do you need any fixed term employment, and everything will be on the roll, and there is no reason why I would spend 10% extra for contractor and another 14% for service tax.
So any other industry view? We saw that view from Pramod. So any other industry view that we have, and we have a very expert panel of legal luminaires. So please shoot your questions to them.
Param, you have any views? Paramishan Balakrishnan is yeah. Param, you are on the line.
Yeah, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
You have any thoughts, Param, from the industry perspective? Param was
no. In fact,
as human resources and with Flipkart. Now he is with Toyota. So, any industrial perspective you could give some thoughts, Param?
No, I tend to agree with almost all the points that was just mentioned now. As Mr. Pramod just mentioned, I also feel the same. See, the point is most often the problem that all industry, the business environment is changing so drastically. So we need a lot of flexibility in doing the business. So the problem is to meet that flexibility, and there's also an increasing cost element which is happening year on year. So now what is happening is to meet that, since there is no flexibility, we are trying to find a way within the existing system. So if you are able to freely hire people and also let them go, and we get away with this Section 5B and other things, I think it will make the life that much more easier. And as far as salary and other things are concerned, there's no concern at all. I think almost all companies do pay very well. But now what is happening is all the good things are happening only to a few set of people. And they also eventually don't work very efficiently as the time passes by. And they all are looking only towards protection. So that is something that we should really push forward and make it a little more easy for doing business. And if you compare the same condition in China or maybe even in Japan, the condition is almost the same, where even the temporary workers are maybe paid a little higher than the permanent guys, just because there is no security, so to say. So as long as you are in a fair level playing field, I don't think there's a problem. So this is one thing. The second very important thing is, if you also see the entire industry, there is a lot of disparity that is taking place here, because there is no common code, so to say, which is binding everybody together, because you will have some sectors trying to exploit the temporary labor too much. And there are some other guys who want to play in a proper field. But then when you look at the labor economics at the end of the day, it doesn't match. So then it creates an unlevel playing field for everybody. So as long as we put in a lot of this thing, for example, even the permanent to temporary ratio and things like that, if even those things can be moderated to a certain extent, some guidelines are available, then I think all the companies will be playing to the same yardstick, and it will be a level playing field for everybody. So here, if you find that in some companies, you may have 90% temporary and only 10% permanent. And there might be other companies who are, working with 70% permanent and 30% temporary. So with this type of situation, what is going to happen is the companies which is employing a higher amount of permanent will definitely lose out in the long run, because they will not be able to compete with the other guys. So how we can try to create a code which is easily understandable, and I'm sure that all multinationals and all companies want to follow the rule, but the rule should be clear and simple to follow. I think that's my viewpoint.
So one question I want to ask the panelists. See, today one of the challenges that India has been facing when you compare vis-a-vis Thailand or Indonesia or Japan has been the productivity levels. Our country, definitely I would say that the productivity levels have been pretty low. So whenever we talk to our counterparts in other countries, in fact, there's a huge difference in working speed and in terms of flexibility and support, what Para mentioned. I think including the overtime options. For example, Thailand, they work the 5th day fully, and there's no restrictions on overtime. So, which are very significant for promoting the manufacturing competitiveness. So, any particular mention about the overtime or increase in productivity, which is ultimately the bigger purpose of these labor reforms? Anywhere the mention is there, how it will impact the current scenario?
Can I take it? See, I had been to China to see this productivity of the people. They work for 11 hours and they get 1.5 times for the remaining 3 hours over and above 8 hours. And I had done a comparison of their productivity vis-a-vis the similar productivity in our place. And when it comes to our contract labor, the productivity of ours was much better. It is only the permanent workers, once they put in 240 days, they are so well protected that except for demanding, they don't have to do any other work till the age of 60. In fact, it is very unfortunate, but my first agreement in life at almost 40 years back was agreement with the permanent workers for giving them the benefits with the condition that they will not interfere in the affairs of the contract people. Now that's Absolutely, the tragedy that we have. That's the tragedy that we have here. that overprotection that has been provided, if it is removed, everything will fall in place. And this extra protection which is good, that once you full 240 days, he becomes permanent, and then working is optional for him. There is no reason at all why he should work.
In fact, it's an irony, sir. In fact, today, the contract labor getting maybe 1/3 of the very senior most operator is giving twice the productivity, and organizations are employing 80% contract labor and 20%, in all the new organizations. So this address is very, very important in the labor reform. So I thought any kind of special mention, unless we try to improve the productivity of this nation, we cannot be competitive vis-a-vis with China, Thailand, or Indonesia. I think I am only disappointed that any kind of improvements or reforms we should suggest.
So the rules under the Code of Wages stipulates what is there under your Shops and Establishments Act. In it says 8 hours and a day, and anything above
Twice.
that would be overtime, and you'd be paid at twice the ordinary rate of wages. And I think the maximum number of hours an individual can work is 12 hours. That again is, I think, stems down from the ILO standards. So it is important to balance out productivity with human rights. I think that balance cannot be lost out. But I do get where you all are coming from, saying because of the protections, there are inefficiencies built in. And I think that is something that organization policy should tap on. Laws are intended, again, this is in my view, laws are intended to make the basic common denominator. And anything beyond that, in terms of efficiency, productivity, all of that changes industry to industry. And we don't have industry specific laws for most industries. And therefore, that's something that as employers, we have the right and the liberty to make policies. If someone is underperforming, if you take the required action at the right time, I understand there are union issues, there are practical difficulties, but those are precedents that we'll need to set, and that will help policy making.
True, madam. I think you hit the nail, but still the challenge is, the productivity. Of course, there are several reasons, as you rightly said. But, once an employee is confirmed, I think as rightly Mr. Pramod had pointed out, I think he gets into that father-in-law psychology. So while, some organizations are exploited. So there are two sides. Like in industrial areas, like, I don't want to say some of the PNR and other places, the people don't get their basic wages or overtime, whereas some companies are pampering too much. That balance is completely out of shape. So that is another challenge. Of course, we need to do that balancing act. But globally, India as a nation in terms of productivity, definitely our levels, I would say, compared to Japan or Thailand, we are at 40% or 50%. That's a fact.
So if I may just
increase the productivity, no way we can match global competitiveness. I think which is the real challenge we need to address. I'm sure Mr. Prabhakar will agree with me, because I know that he is battling with this issue for ages, and there is no magical medicine for this.
No, actually, productivity cannot be achieved by legislation. What is important is the legislation should be such that we should have power to hire and fire a person who is non-performer. That is not there. The moment is more than 100 or more 300, I can't touch him. I'm talking of factory situation. But take IT industry. IT industry, if somebody does not work properly, he is sent out because there is no restriction. Therefore, 99% people work properly, but not in factory. So therefore, remove Chapter 5B totally and give us permission. Retrenchment law also should be changed. Now, retrenchment is only for surplus, never for surplus. It should be for performance also. Then quality will improve on its own. As Veena rightly said, see, quality angles will change from industry to industry. So therefore, if I have right to hire and fire, everything will be all right. But the only thing is whether we will misuse it or not. Gone are those days. Today, we have to concentrate on production productivity, shortage of labor is there. So employers are not that bad as earlier. In fact, before 1976, there was no militancy. In 1976, when the Chapter 5 was introduced, militancy erupted. So therefore, we should keep this in mind. And what is important is ease of doing business and give us the right to manage. That was taken away. So if you give us the right to manage, things will improve.
I'll just give you an example of what I faced in Hindustan Liver. When we were manufacturing this clinic shampoo and it was packed in a glass bottle and we had to shift to a plastic bottle, the union said, we are sorry, you have to give us a notice of change because our agreement is to sign it in a glass bottle. And you know the procedure for you can never get into the... So this item 9, 10 and 11 under section 9A are deadly sections. I mean, as long as the union doesn't hold you for ransom, you are better off. Otherwise, it is absolutely impossible to make any changes.
In fact, in Toyota, we believe that this communication between management and union is super important. We have wage settlement every year, and Param will agree with me. We have at least minimum 50 to 60 meetings every year to settle the wage. Not the purpose is not the wage portion. In the process, we are communicating. You know, we are trying to teach them the cultural this thing, develop them. I think this is something which is very, very unique. Probably it has got its own challenges. But anyway, I think this is a big subject. I think we can discuss it on a separate this thing. But I think we have a long way to go. I think how to develop the people, as you rightly said, laws cannot dictate this. At the same time, how do we change the culture and how it should be eco-friendly? I think that's very important. In fact, in Bangalore Chamber, sir, we have changed the name as instead of ease of doing business. Under the former additional chief secretary, we have constituted a team. Start to sustenance. Yes to yes.
Yeah, I
Sir,
think
Prakash
Poornima
here.
wanted to say something and her voice got drowned off. Poornima, is there something that wanted to contribute?
I don't know. I just wanted to say that the word productivity is not really used in any of the codes. So I think it comes from the idea of leave and time off and things like that. So productivity is not really the focus, but the industrial relations. And I think the point has already been. And I see other people with hands up. So I'll.
Yeah, this is Prakash from Tata Kirloskar Auto Parts and also manufacturing committee. I take care of manufacturing committee in BCIC. I have two questions actually. One is some clarifications I need on this fixed term employment. I think there is some mention in one of the code. Whether that can be clarified what it means and how much it is relevant to our industry. And second one is these labor codes, which are right now 3, I heard, and once it gets approval of the president, whether the state level is authorized to make some changes or some modifications, obviously whether it's going to be just through and through that needs to be followed, how is it? Anybody can take this.
The state government also is empowered to make some changes in some of the legislation, not all legislations. In fact, various state governments are doing a lot of damage, reducing threshold limit and all those things. Now, threshold limit cannot be reduced. That is a very good thing. So, therefore, state government can do in certain areas, but for major this one again we have to approach the center. And as far as sector employment is concerned, that's a good concept. As Mr. Mahatme rightly said, that will eliminate contract labor system and it will help us in directly engaging people who can work properly. In fact, nowadays, a lot of workers do not want permanent employment. So they want to learn and again go to some other industry and let's say bargain for more and all those things. So slowly this will come up. And one thing important is there is no cap for renewals. It was there in the 2019 code, it was there, but now there is no cap. There was also welcome change. But ultimately, as Mahatma rightly said, Section 9A, 9, 10, 11, and Chapter 5B, if these two things go, big industries will survive. You know, big industries only can increase the employment, and today service sector has grown, but manufacturing sector has to grow. Then only GDP will go up.
Mr. Prabhakar, you also talked about the DA, right? the new basic salary, what you mentioned is the basic salary plus 50% of allowances, which means it will have a huge impact on other things like the provident fund and retirement benefits to the organizations.
This will have impact here and also gratuity bonus. But bonus and PF is 15,000 rupees, so therefore it does not have much impact. But gratuity it will have impact. They should have made very simple this one. They should have said minimum wage is the basic and allowances you can give. That will not attract any other thing. That should have been made clear. But in the application, even for advocates, it's difficult to understand
Quite
that.
grey now.
Yes.
So, there's one small
Sorry, there was
request
a
I would
request.
have.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that fixed term employment basically means the engagement of an employee, I was reading the definition, on the basis of a written contract of employment for a fixed period. So that contract will set out the hours of work, wages, allowances, and other benefits, but these shall not be lesser than that of a permanent employee doing the same work or of similar nature during that period of time. I think this is what the definition said. So you can then accordingly hire people. Of course, this is just the base act, and we'll see how
Basically,
it
same
goes.
work, same pay.
Same work, same fee, but you're then hiring them maybe just for 6 months or 1 year, and
Is
that's
there,
all. So you can
yeah,
hire
is there any
people.
mention of the time period or any minimum time period? There's nothing.
No, what I
They,
think this definition,
They're left open actually, that's a good thing.
yeah.
In fact, it depends upon season and availability of skilled labor.
so they've
Yeah.
so
Sir,
they've
this is
left the
Sundar Murthy from MSME, Small Scale Industries, representing. I think I thank Mr. Prabhakar and other panel members. I have only 2 points, 2 questions. One is that, as Mr. Pramod mentioned, this 240 days has been that considering him as the permanent worker is removed or still a point available. Number 2, we employ anywhere from 10 to 50, 60 people in our industry. But what is happening is a political leader or a union leader outside our industry starts a union and takes 3, 4, 5 people of our industry and form a union. And as you know what happens when he starts all those things. Those provisions have been totally, we are free to do that, because most of us manage the industry one-man show, and we spend a lot of time, many times, for courts and other things. I would like the panel to please clarify.
In fact, I would like to clarify one thing to Mr. Pramod also. See, 240 days completion doesn't confer permanent status. It only confers a retrenchment benefit. So therefore, we are not worried about 240 days. And secondly, I see, as far as unionization is concerned, so certain restrictions have been put now. How it works, we have got to take it. And I see, outsiders forming union, that is even now still allowed. But what is important is union menace has to be controlled, especially by the labor department. They have got to call union leaders and getting problem. They should warn them and advise them. So this is a menace which can't be eliminated by legislation, because the human rights issue, everything has come. So therefore, that is a difficult situation. There one has to manage properly.
Veena,
What is important is overall this new code, whether it helps us in ease of doing business. Yes, it, to some extent it helps us. Some more has to be done. And I see, fortunately, gig workers, platform workers are not covered by IR code. So they are covered by only social security code. So therefore, to that extent, we will not have IR issues or legal issues from them. And for them, the government has to contribute for various funds. So that's a different issue altogether. That is going to benefit unorganized sector.
Thank you, sir. So,
Mr.
in the
Prabhakar,
interest of
I
time,
just wanted to make just one suggestion to Mr.
Sure, sure,
Prabhakar. See, this when the ID Act came into being in 1947, the whole definition of workman was so designed to take care of the people who are weaker section. And even a supervisor with 15,000 rupees salary, in those days it was something like 700 rupees salary, was kept out of the purview because he doesn't need a protection. They were all supervisory case. It was only after Justice Krishna Iyer's judgment that the whole thing changed, and everybody, including the doctor and this thing, became a workman. I think now when we are making a change, I think we should go back, and the whole idea of ID Act is to protect the weaker section and not to protect the people who can compete in the international market. Now it is extending to IT section, which is really not the right thing. They are not at all. So we are dealing with the people who can bargain on their own, but if they don't work, we cannot terminate them because they have all the protection. I think that is one change which has to be done in the reforms which we have to come out of.
For second class labor comes suggested 25,000 rupees limit. If somebody is getting more than 25,000, he should not be a workman under the ID Act.
Yeah.
At least today they should make it 50,000.
Yeah, make it whatever is the limit, but there should be some limit or on the nature of work. Why should a doctor or a scientist or a IT professional get the same protection which was designed for workmen in the mines?
Yeah,
and plantations?
Definitely. So what this tells us is very clearly that, there are so many things that are unanswered, lot of gray areas, and so many things that need to be clarified sector-wise, cross-sector-wise. And I think that lays the need for us to have a much longer discussion on this, maybe a half a day or a 1 day. And since we have all the legal luminaries here, I would like to throw this back at you and ask you if you would have the time to come onto maybe a half-day workshop that we will do very shortly, and then we will submit our position to the government of Karnataka. Is that okay as the way forward?
That's
Absolutely.
fine. May I make a suggestion? If there are any specific concerns that members have, then perhaps they could send it in writing. So we sort of look at those specifically, and in the context of the new laws also, that would make the discussion more efficient.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
So I would also suggest we can get the voice of our members. Then this panelist can answer to them, and we can have an interactive session. And based on that voice, we can have a kind of a detailed half-day program, which would be great. We can clarify a lot of things.
Gratefully agreed. I think our half-day program sounds wonderful. But just one thing in terms of expectation setting and what we should be going to the government with, I think there should be, they've just introduced 4 large codes. So having sweeping changes in terms of removal of 5B, those are things that are like asking for too much. I think at the moment we should look at what the powers of the state government are and what are the reforms that they can really give us. And I think to get any meaningful benefit out of the state government, our ask should be reasonable and meaningful. So with that, that's my only suggestion here, because if we go into a deep dive and a critique of these codes, that has passed. The codes have already been passed by both houses.
So just an off-the-cuff suggestion, if you could break down aspects that are relevant under the codes for the BCIC members, and then maybe have the workshop structured around them, as Poornima said, if you can collate, have a questionnaire sent out on main key topics, break it down from there. I think that would work better in the interest of time.
In fact, BCIC being primarily concerned with the manufacturing industry, so they should tell the government to invite new industries. So as per the exemption clause, please exempt Chapter 5B for the new industries, so that new industries, big industries can come to the state. That's more important.
Absolutely.
Very good.
In fact, we have the former Labour Secretary, Mr. Debjani, also with our team. So definitely we can also take his inputs and how to approach the government. Definitely as rightly said by Veena, I think we should take it step by step and more focused areas we can try to deliberate on specific issues so that it is very easier to take it up and prioritize.
Definitely, sir. I think we have a plan now after what we have heard, more from a content perspective as well as, what's the way forward. So we will reschedule with a fresh set of ideas and an agenda, a framework we will put. And then we will see, what are the low-hanging fruit which we should go at, and then what we should do in the long and the medium term. So with that, I would like to thank each and every one of you, Mr. Prabhakar, Mr. Mahatme, as well as our president for coming over and spending this time. And needless to say, Veena, Poornima, Abe Abraham, Debjani, Aich, you were great with all your inputs. Thank you so much. And if you can shoot off your notes to Rupa, that will help us to collate the white paper and again send it back to you. And last but not least is the chairs and co-chairs who are here. There were more than 30 people who had joined, and you can.
But Mr. Ashok Saxena is also there, the former managing director of Hindustan Aeronautics, and he is our mentor to aviation sector. In fact, Saxena ji, I think Saxena ji, you're able to hear us?
Sir.
Yeah, wanted to speak to you, but my voice is not going out.
No, your voice is very crystal clear. And Mr. Ahmed Ali is also there.
Yes, okay. Okay. EI for an investment, and they had the reservation earlier about the participation at 26%. The government had made 34, 70, 100%. But the biggest problem with them is the exit. Does new code allow the exit and
I think the voice is breaking, I think.
Prabhakar is still there?
Sir,
yes, sir,
not
please
able to
carry
hear
on.
you properly. You can talk a little bit louder.
And defense.
Breaking.
Sir, I think there are network issues at your end. That's probably.
I think we'll collate his voice later. Yeah.
Sure. So
I think
please.
he's talking about the 76% opening of the aviation sector for foreign investments, which will propel a lot of new investments, which is a welcome move. But labor reform should align to that, he says.
Yes.
Remove Chapter 5, they will come to Karnataka.
Noted, sir. Thank you very much. So, Ahmed Ali, you would like to have some final words, sir?
You want me to talk? I'll talk. There's nothing much. In fact, I had called Prabhakar. I did not know about this, webinar or web discussion going to be held. So I told him we must have one, and he said, I think Prithvi has already contacted him. And I said, there's a lot of positive. I hope people don't unnecessarily criticize this bill, which I'm sure all the union leaders in the papers, you can see it. I think it's a good bill. It is progressive, and we need to make sure that it works well. Yeah. Yes, I think one of the things that I don't know. So I had to go for another call to leave at 5:15. I joined back because my heart is here, but that was a business call, so I had to be there. But this gratuity part, I'm sure it has been covered, which is also a good thing. So otherwise, in my days and earlier days, people remain in an organization just to get the gratuity. Yeah. I think that will be not there. So I think there are all positives. So I would like to be a part of taking this forward, because a lot of my clients are interested. I don't do industrial relations consulting, but Since I'm an HR man, everybody asks, and every time somebody asks me, I call Prabhakar. So I become the relaying person, and Prabhakar gives me free advice, and I charge my client. Okay, all right. With that, all the best to the team to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you
so
very
much,
much.
sir.
Thank
I
you.
want to
So,
one more point, just small point,
yes,
short
please.
point. Handle a large number of high-end technology workers making supersonic aircraft. I'm a firm believer that Indian labor is not inefficient, not unproductive. They are as good as American or Russians or the. But what we lack today in our country is good technology. We do not provide them the good technology, good tooling, good environment, good safety measures, and also interpersonal relationship. I had introduced in my shops, and I used to control nearly 5,000 workers, shop level participatory management in the will come and sit with me as a general manager at that time, and we will discuss what are your problems, why you people are not performing to the optimum level. The base regarding that was tooling here, here, technology here, all sorts of things. We have to also little be advisory to the particularly the MSME sector. Adopt good technology, good tooling, good environment, and also not only monetary incentive, physical.
So not able to hear properly.
Very difficult. I can't hear at all.
Very difficult to hear. Signal issue. But what I think he's trying to say is that the
I think we
productivity
can
has
conclude
been very
now.
good based on the atmosphere. I think his own experience in HAL, where our Indian productivity is much better compared to American and other airline manufacturers. Anyway,
at least at par. And I
anyway,
also
we need to
wanted to
address the
understand
challenges.
from
It's very important. We agree with you. Yeah, sorry, Augustus.
No problem, sir.
We
Just
got out of time.
No, I think
Today it's been a
apologies.
wonderful discussion. Very nice discussion.
Yeah,
Thoroughly enjoyed.
Definitely. Very rich discussion. So with your permission, can I go ahead and close it, and then we will send out a note in the way forward. So thank you. Have a great weekend and stay safe. God bless you.
We can all take a pic actually. Augustus, we can all take a selfie.
Sorry, sir.
We can always all take a
Take a
selfie.
picture.
Oh yeah, the selfie,
The
right?
least we can do.
Okay, I don't know whether Rupa and
I'll
have done
click it in my iPad only.
Okay, you're doing it on your iPad. Okay, I'm just have a
So,
difference.
Mr. Ahmadalle, actually, you have to be a little more brighter in the light.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
I can't
Now
see.
we are
Yeah.
tracking,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. All right.
Let me just. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. I too got it.
Well, I think, sir, just one more because Mr. Prabhakar.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
All the best. Thank you, Mr. President. Very well done. Thank you. Good
Thank you.
luck.
I think you did it. I have just been a guest. Thank you so much, all of you.
Justin, well done. See you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.